Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Bryant, and I am the Program Manager for Community Wealth Building Initiatives at Wacif. I'm joined by Allison Powers, who's a Program Manager at Capital Impact Partners. And this is the DC Co-op Impact Grant Info Session. This is the second of two sessions for the 2021 DC Co-op Impact Grant. The deadline is April 19th. We are going to begin the info session by talking about each of our organizations, Wacif and Capital Impact Partners. And then we're going to do a deep dive into the grant, the purpose, eligibility requirements, and we're going to take a look at the actual application. If at any time you have questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box on Zoom, and a recording of the webinar will be sent out afterwards. It'll also be posted on Wacif's YouTube channel. Before we jump in, I just want to start by talking a little bit about what a co-op is. So this grant is for cooperative businesses. That means broadly a business who has a shared ownership structure and shared decision-making. So if your business has one owner, then it's not a cooperative and it doesn't qualify for this particular grant. Both Wacif and Capital Impact Partners have other grant programs, but this grant program, the DC Co-op Impact Grant, is specifically for employee-owned businesses. And so that means that it's a business that's owned by a group of people where they all share in the profit and decision-making of the business. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to drop it into the Q&A box. So let's get started. Again, my name is Jennifer Bryant, and I am with the Washington Area Community Investment Fund. Our vision is an equitable and just society where communities can prosper and thrive through entrepreneurship. Wacif has been around since the late 1980s, and cooperatives and employee ownership are in our DNA. Our first loan was actually to the Pasadena Housing Cooperative in the late 1980s. And since then, we've provided more than $34 million in direct investment throughout the DC area. This is just a snapshot of the last 7 years for Wacif. We like to say that we're a small CDFI with big impact. Again, we track how we're serving entrepreneurs and businesses in the DC region. We're a regional CDFI that serves DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And the acronym CDFI stands for Community Development Financial Institution. These numbers are actually pre-pandemic, and we have really been working hard during this difficult year, this 2020 and the beginning of 2021, to serve entrepreneurs, primarily entrepreneurs of color, by providing PPP loans, grant programs, and other services and technical assistance to help them navigate this challenging time. Wacif has 4 areas of focus. We provide workshops and training to entrepreneurs and small businesses. We do one-on-one advising and consulting. We provide small business financing. And we also have a number of signature initiatives, including the Enterprising Women of Color Business Center, which recently launched, the JP Morgan Chase Entrepreneurs of Color Fund, and the DC Employee Ownership Initiative, which is the program that I lead at Wacif. In June, we're going to be launching the Greater Washington Center for Employee Ownership to really expand and centralize the resources available to employee-owned businesses in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. This is a snapshot of the DC Employee Ownership Initiative. The goal is to preserve legacy businesses and create new pathways to entrepreneurship through employee ownership. And so we provide pro bono technical assistance and training around employee ownership conversions. We do events like DC Co-op Day. We support existing and emerging cooperatives through things like this grant program, the DC Co-op Impact Grant, and other technical assistance and resources. We also do a lot of work around ecosystem development. We partnered with DC government last year for the Shared Equity and Economic Development Fellowship, and we work closely with the DC Cooperative Stakeholders Group. With that, I will turn it over to Allison Powers.
Thanks, Jennifer. My name is Allison Powers. I'm the manager of Cooperative and Community Initiatives here at Capital Impact Partners, and we're excited to partner with Wacif on the DC Co-op Impact Grant. As you can see here, this is our vision and mission. We are, like Wacif, a CDFI, or Community Development Financial Institution that was actually originally part of the National Cooperative Bank. So we like to say that co-ops are part of our DNA. Next slide, please. We are one of the larger CDFIs. We work nationally, although we do have geographic focuses in DC, Detroit, New York, Texas, and California. Next slide, please. Like most CDFIs, we don't only do lending. We also have programmatic areas, including grants like this one. We also do a national programmatic initiatives like the Equitable Developers Initiative and some of our. And in addition to cooperative development, we also focus on healthcare, education, affordable housing, healthy food, and aging. Next slide, please. This is our strategic pillars. It's the lens in which we see our work, addressing systemic poverty, creating equity, building healthy communities, and promoting inclusive growth. And in case you're wondering how that relates to co-ops, we really see co-ops as a way to build economic opportunity for residents, preserve existing businesses, create quality jobs, expand and preserve assets, stabilize neighborhoods. I think this is especially relevant today with the economic and health crisis that's going on right now. A lot of people are looking to the future of the economy and DC specifically, and thinking about what they want it to look like going forward. And we know that worker-owned businesses tend to be more stable and community-centered. Next slide, please. So this is just speaking to those different types of work that we do right now. It's not just strategic financing, it's also policy partnership, grant awards. We try to think of the ecosystem holistically and not just, one small piece of it. And doing this sort of geographic work really helps because we can mean housing, food, small business, and the different sectors that we work in. And is that the last slide? I'm forgetting. This just shows the total amount that we have lent to co-ops over the years, over 300 million. We tend to do larger transactions. And although we are partnering with a CDFI that does small business, so we will have kind of greater tools and capacity moving forward in the future. And just to wrap up before I hand it back over to Jennifer, that I really see that co-ops are having a moment right now, both nationally and in DC. I think that there's a lot of traction right now with the model, a lot of people that are thinking about it and talking about it. And we really look towards folks like you all who are forming co-ops as the folks that are going to encourage the city to create more policy and more programs and more support for this. And hopefully this sort of award will help demonstrate what some of those startup or expansion money can go towards and really help jumpstart. So excited to see you all virtually and read your applications.
Thanks so much, Allison. Cynthia, thank you for your question. I think that we're going to address it in the next few slides, but we'll also return to it at the end. anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop it into the Q&A box. So now we're going to jump into the actual grant itself. This is an image of the Earthbound Building Co-op. They were one of the recipients of the 2020 DC Co-op Impact Grant. They are a Maryland-based cooperative that does farm infrastructure and building. And they really are an exemplary example of the type of organization that we want to lend to for this cooperative. It's community-centered, community-based. They have a shared ownership structure, and they have a shared decision-making structure. And with that, we'll jump into an overview of this grant. So the DC Co-op Impact Grant will be awarding 4 $10,000 grants. The grant deadline is April 19th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. I encourage you not to wait till the last minute to get it in, just so you don't stress yourself out. The grant application is really simple and accessible. It's only 16 questions. And we did that because we want this to be a grant that anyone who meets the eligibility criteria can apply for. Anyone that has applied for grants before knows that sometimes the applications can be a little cumbersome. And so we didn't want that to be the case for this grant. We want it to really be accessible to everyone. So for the narrative questions, the maximum word count is 500. The grant period is 12 months. And so we will be dispersing the grants in June, and then you'll have 12 months to use the grant. At the end of the 12-month period, then you're going to complete a final budget and final report, just documenting how you use the funds. So the purpose of this grant is that we want to encourage the growth of quality jobs, sustainable businesses, support leadership development and asset building through the cooperative model in communities of color and or historically marginalized communities. When we say historically marginalized, we're talking about communities, both urban and rural, that have been affected by biased structures and systems, resulting in economic exclusion, displacement, underemployment, and inability to create generational wealth. So that's who we're really targeting for this grant. This is a grant that's designed to support early stage cooperatives. So that means that you either are in the first few years of your cooperative, or you have a cooperative idea that you haven't started yet. We want to use this grant as an opportunity to increase the exposure for DC area cooperatives. As Allison mentioned, cooperatives are having a moment, and DC has a really long and rich history of cooperative economic development. We really want to show the world that DC and Maryland and Virginia, our region, is a place where cooperatives are growing and thriving. We also want to provide support for early stage cooperatives to become loan ready. And so I think that there isn't a lot of financial resources available to early stage cooperatives, which is why we created this grant. But we also want to use the grant as a bridge to help people be able to access capital so that they can grow their cooperative businesses. So eligibility. This grant is open to cooperatively owned businesses led by people of color and or members of a historically disinvested community. It's a regional grant, so it's open to people in DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. It's open to cooperatives in all sectors, in all stages of development. And we're going to give preference to food cooperatives because just in general in this area, we need more food cooperatives and we want to support food cooperatives. However, all cooperatives in all sectors and stages are invited to apply. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what those sectors and stages are in a second. So by cooperative sectors, we're talking about the different types of cooperatives that you may be thinking about starting or have started. So for example, a food co-op, which can be consumer owned or worker owned. A worker owned cooperative, that's where the workers share ownership. So there's not one boss, but the workers themselves are worker owners and they share ownership of the business and they share the profits of the business. And they also share the risks inherent with creating a business, and they share the decision-making. So that's what makes something a cooperative business. It's a structure. Cynthia asked, does it have to be a specific entity type, like an LLC or an LLP or an S Corp? And no, it does. We're not concerned with how you chose to, which entity you selected for the business. We're concerned with that, your operating agreement and how you are sharing ownership in the business. In terms of the number of people that you need, I would say 3 or more, because if it's just you, it's not a cooperative. If it's you and one other person, then that's a partnership. But if it's 3 or more, then you have a group, and that could be a cooperative if you're organized around the shared ownership and decision-making structure. So I hope that answered your question. The other kind of sectors, and there are many, are consumer-owned. That's when the people who use the business or service, like for example, a food cooperative can be consumer-owned, where the people who shop at the food cooperative actually have a stake and often, will pay a share to support the cooperative and help it get off the ground. A purchasing cooperative where people come together to purchase, for example, the Community Purchasing Alliance brings together churches and schools to purchase things that they all use so that they can access bulk pricing and get a lower price for everyone. Platform cooperatives are generally kind of tech cooperatives that if you have a platform like Twitter, it would be Twitter, but owned by the users. So that's a platform co-op. Stages of development. This grant is open to cooperatives in all stages of development, whether that be the idea stage where you're pre-startup and you're kind of planning, you can apply for this grant. Or perhaps you have already started the employee-owned business and it's been in operation and generating revenue for less than 2 years, or you're in the growth stage and you're in operation and you're generating revenue for 2 to 5 years. This is also open to businesses that are exploring conversion or acquisition. That means that you're a traditional business, however, you're exploring converting your business to a shared ownership structure. And so instead of having one owner, you want to explore how you can convert your business to being worker owned or to having multiple owners so that the workers can share in the benefits of ownership. And then lastly, it's also open to employee-owned businesses that are established. I see some other questions coming in, and so I'm going to hold those to the end. And next, we're going to jump into the application. So we wanted to kind of show you what the application looks like. So these are the questions. As I mentioned before, there's 16 questions. The first question is, are you a cooperative business? And so we want to know, are you a business that has a shared ownership structure and that has a shared decision-making structure? We also want to know if your business is located in the DC metro region, which we're defining as DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. And is it led by people of color and or located in a historically disinvested community? So that first one is a yes or no question. And that's really just determining your eligibility for the grant. The second is, where is your cooperative business located? And so this will be where you indicate whether your business is located in DC, Maryland, or Northern Virginia. If it's located outside of that geographic area, then you're not eligible for this grant. Third is, what is the name of the cooperative business? If you're in the startup stage and you just kind of have an idea, then you can just kind of let us know, we're thinking about starting a food cooperative and we haven't determined the name yet. But if you do have a name, then just drop that in there. Number 4, did you receive the DC Co-op Impact Grant in 2020? Previous grantees are eligible to apply again for the second round of a grant. However, we want you to apply for a new scope of work that expands on your previous project in a meaningful way, or a project that is new and different. Number 5, how would you describe the stage of development for your co-op? And we previously went through the stages of development. It'll also be listed on the application, but let us know if you're pre-startup, startup, early stage, growth stage, or established. Number 6, how would you define your co-op sector? On the previous slide, we also explore the different co-op sectors: food co-op, consumer, purchasing, platform. That'll also be a drop down for you to select which one your co-op is in. Number 7, your contact information. And this is the contact info for the primary contact person. So this will be the person that we're going to reach out to let them know whether or not you received the grant. And this will be the person that, if you do receive the grant, we will contact to get the money over to you and also to send the final report to. So we just need one primary contact person that you want to list for the grant. Number 8, how many community members do you currently have in your cooperative or engaged in the planning process? And so if you've been meeting at the library, well, I guess people aren't doing that during the pandemic, but if you've been meeting via Zoom with 5 people who are all working with you to start this cooperative, then that's where you would list that. Briefly describe the mission of your cooperative, how and why it was started, and a recent accomplishment. And again, these narrative questions have a maximum of 500 words. And so that's about 1 to 2 paragraphs. So just let us know, how it got started. If you're pre-startup or in the beginning stages, just let us know what made you even want to start a cooperative. And what are your goals? And a recent accomplishment could be something as simple as we've had 3 meetings with our group where we've explored what this could look like. Number 10, how is your business using the cooperative model to encourage the growth of quality jobs and services, leadership development, and asset building in communities of color and or historically disinvested communities in DC? When we talk about asset building, what we're really talking about is ownership. And so how is your cooperative project encouraging shared ownership in the community that you're building it in? Number 11, how do you engage the community in strategy and decision-making? Which communities, be specific, are most impacted by your work? How are people of color and or historically disinvested communities represented in leadership roles? So this one is key. I think that even if you have a group of people, if you all are working to start a bookstore cooperative in Anacostia, how are you engaging people from that community to be involved in the development of your cooperative? And if you're in a community, how are the community members represented in leadership roles? And so we want to see, are you building this in a vacuum, or are you really doing the work to involve other people in the community where your cooperative is being built in leadership and decision-making? Number 12, what goal will the DC Co-op Impact Grant help you achieve? So how will you be using the $10,000 if you should receive it? And this is where you can tell us just one SMART goal that you have for how you're going to use the grant's funds. SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And so you really want to break out a specific goal. And that could look like, if our cooperative receives $10,000, we're going to use it for this specific purpose. And that purpose should be measurable, attainable, and realistic. Attainable meaning that you should be able to achieve that goal within the 12 months that you have to use the grant dollars. And it should be timely and relevant to right now for your cooperative business in the stage that you're in. Number 13, describe the biggest current or anticipated challenge related to your goal and how you plan to address this challenge. For example, with the previous round of the DC Co-op Impact Grant, we released the grant right before the pandemic started. And so people were applying during lockdown when it first started last March. And so one of the challenges that a lot of the co-ops wrote about in their application was just how they were going to pivot because of the pandemic. Before, you may have, worked with community members in person, done in-person outreach. So how are you going to do that now with the new challenge of the pandemic, or whatever other challenge you may be facing with your cooperative business? Number 14, have you applied for a small business loan, or are you planning to apply for one in the next year? This question will not impact your eligibility for the grant. It won't bar you from getting the grant, as Wacif and Capital Impact Partners are both community development financial institutions, and we provide loan capital to small businesses. We just want to know if that's something that you're looking to do so that we can provide you with the resources that can help you achieve that goal. And so if you're not, that's perfectly okay. If you've never applied for a business loan or you don't plan on applying one, that's perfectly fine. You can just select no for that answer. And if you are and you select yes, then we'll be sure to help you connect with resources so that you can prepare yourself to access capital in the future. The last two questions on the grant application are, if you receive this grant, how do you plan to share your work and document your success? We ask that because we really want to amplify the work of your cooperative business. For example, with the last round, Earthbound Building, the cooperative that I featured at the beginning, they did a panel discussion with us at a conference, and they were able to successfully launch a crowdfunding campaign, and they raised over $60,000. And so we really want to amplify projects like that you're doing. And so we want to know how you're going to document your success. Lastly, if selected, do you grant permission to photograph, document, or video your participation in the grant program? And again, this just goes back to us wanting to amplify your work. And so when we announce the grantees, when we have selected who is going to receive the grant, we will share photographs about your cooperative business and really just help to expand awareness of the work that you're doing. So how can you actually use the grant funds? Here's some sample use of funds. And again, the grant amount is $10,000. So you can use that $10,000 to do a feasibility study. And a feasibility study is really for folks that are in the idea stage. And so it can help you figure out if the cooperative that you're planning is even a good idea. The second one is entity formation, which Cynthia mentioned earlier. And so you can use the grant dollars to help you work with a lawyer or another consultant to help you create your operating agreement, your bylaws, to get the business license and do all the other things that you need to do to become a legal entity. You can use it to create bylaws and or an operating agreement. You can use it for cooperative education and training. For example, if you want to use some of the grant dollars to attend the food cooperative conference, you can do that. You can use it for contractors or consultants. You can use it to do an outreach campaign or marketing. You could also use it for a membership campaign. And we really aren't placing very many restrictions on the use of funds. So if there's something else, you can just list that in your grant application and let us know how you're thinking about using these grant dollars. Lastly, we wanted to share the timeline for the grant. So the grant launched on March 4th. We've done 2 grant info sessions on March 16th and March 31st. The grant deadline is April 19th at 11:59 p.m. And we're going to review the grant applications and make selections by May 17th is when we will make the announcement. We will be notifying all of the applicants before May 17th, and then we're going to officially make the announcement on May 17th. On June 1st is when we hope to have the grant awards dispersed to the recipients of the grant. So between May 17th and June 1st, for those cooperatives that do receive the grant, we're going to work with you to get your W-9 form and just make sure that we have all the information that we need so that we can disperse the grants to you. And lastly, the final grant report will be due on June 30th of next year. And again, you have 12 months to use the grant funds. This is the application link, which we can also drop into the chat box. And these are the links to both the websites for the organizations that are funding the grant, Wacif and Capital Impact Partners. Allison, if you wanted to unmute and just briefly tell people about the national grant program that Capital Impact Partners has.
Sure. The Co-op Innovation Award is actually being launched tomorrow on April 1st. And that is as I said, anyone in the country is eligible, and it's for programs that are replicable and really looking to go to scale, an innovative idea that is either being led by a community of color or, in a rural community that hasn't really had access to resources. We are looking to provide seed funding. So it is for early stage projects that, might not have gotten a lot of other funding. It does tend to be pretty competitive because it's folks from all over the country, and the grants are $25,000 to $50,000. As I said before, the application drops tomorrow. You'll be able to find it on our website. Also, you can feel free to email me if you're on any of our social media. We're also going to be posting about it a lot tomorrow. So if you think the guidelines are pretty specific, and it's for food, worker, or housing cooperatives. So yeah,
perfect.
We'll also be having webinars on April 8th and 20th for further information, and the application will be in English and Spanish.
Great, thank you for sharing. And you actually can apply for both grants. The DC Co-op Impact Grant is regional, it's $10,000. And as Allison mentioned, the national grant program, co-op grant program that Capital Impact Partners runs is $25,000 to $50,000, and it's open to organizations nationally. And so you can find out more about that by going to capitalimpact.org. And so lastly, this is my contact information. If you have any questions about the DC Co-op Impact Grant application as you're completing it, feel free to reach out to me via email and I will follow up with you. I'm going to check now to see if there's any questions. In the chat in the Q&A box. Allison, there's a question for you from Vijay. He asked, what is the deadline for the national award that you just mentioned?
Sorry, the deadline is the last day of April, and I'm putting in the co-op page of our website, and it will have the application on it by midday tomorrow.
Okay, great.
I just dropped that in the chat.
Any other questions? All right, well, if there are no other questions, feel free to reach out to me via email or phone with any questions that you have about the grant. Again, the deadline for the DC Co-op Impact Grant is April 19th. I encourage you all to apply, and we both look forward to reading your applications. Thank you so much for attending the info session today. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Have a great one.
Thank you.